Twin girls vanish while in dad's custody. Then their grandmother discovers this. Imagine this. Two little girls, barely 4 years old, vanish without a trace while under their father's care. Their smiling faces on flyers scattered across town, their mother consumed by fear and guilt, and the entire neighborhood holding its breath, waiting, hoping, praying for answers. But what if the truth wasn't out there somewhere? What if it was hidden behind something as ordinary as a bookshelf in the father's study? This is the chilling story of Emma and Lily Harmon, twin sisters, whose mysterious disappearance unraveled secrets no one saw coming. Beth Harmon, a nurse and devoted mother, had been doing everything she could to hold her family together. Despite the cracks forming in her marriage, her husband Peter, once a successful banker, had spiraled into alcoholism after losing his job. The stress ate away at him until he became almost unrecognizable, not just to Beth, but even to himself. When things got unbearable, Beth made the painful decision to leave, moving into a modest camper at Pinewood Lakeside Campground. She promised herself and her daughters that this separation was temporary, a step toward creating a healthier environment for all of them. Little did she know how quickly tragedy would strike. The day started like any other. It was early afternoon when Peter claimed he last saw the twins playing hide and seek in the backyard. He counted to 20, turned around, and they were gone. Just like that. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses, nothing. Panic set in immediately. Phone calls were made, police arrived, and soon the quiet suburban street buzzed with activity. Flyers went up, search parties formed, and yet not a single lead emerged. As hours stretched into days, Beth felt the weight of despair pressing down on her chest. How could this happen? And why now, when she wasn't even living in the same house? Detective Morris took charge of the investigation, methodically questioning everyone involved. From the beginning, though, something didn't sit right. Peter seemed overly defensive, almost paranoid about certain parts of the house being touched or disturbed. His drinking worsened with each passing hour, making his behavior increasingly erratic. Then there was Claire, Peter's elderly mother, usually composed and proper. Claire appeared unusually nervous during interviews, her hands trembling as she twisted a handkerchief between her fingers. Something was off. But what? As Beth tried to piece together the puzzle, small details began nagging at her mind. Why were the twins' toothbrushes missing? Where were their hairbrushes? These weren't items a kidnapper would take. And then there was Peter's study, a room he guarded fiercely, snapping at anyone who dared touch his books or rearrange anything on the shelves. I have a system, he'd growl whenever questioned. A system for what exactly? None of it. Added up, and the more Beth thought about it, the more uneasy she became. Meanwhile, tensions between Beth and Peter escalated. In his drunken rages, Peter accused Beth of abandoning the family, implying she might somehow be responsible for the girls' disappearance. The accusations stung deeply because Beth knew the truth. She loved her daughters more than anything in the world. Every waking moment since leaving had been dedicated to building a better future for them. Yet here she was, fighting against suspicion, instead of focusing on finding Emma and Lily. The emotional toll was crushing, but Beth refused to give up. She couldn't afford to. One evening, as Beth sat alone in her camper, trying to process the chaos, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Claire, looking pale and disheveled, as though she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes darted nervously over her shoulder before stepping inside. "Beth," she whispered, her voice trembling. I couldn't stay silent anymore. What Claire revealed next sent shockwaves through Beth's already fragile state. Behind the bookcase in Peter's study lay a hidden room, a secret space Peter had constructed months earlier. That morning, while dusting, Claire accidentally triggered the mechanism and discovered the unthinkable. Emma and Lily were alive, huddled together on a mattress inside. Relief washed over Beth instantly, but it was short-lived. If the girls were safe, why hadn't Peter told anyone? What was he hiding? Worse still, how long did he plan to keep them locked away? The questions swirled in Beth's mind. As reality collided with betrayal, Peter wasn't just a desperate father clinging to his daughters. He was a man driven by paranoia and fear, willing to deceive everyone, including his own mother, to maintain control. But Claire's confession came with urgency. She'd overheard Peter talking about fleeing the country with the twins, crossing the border to Canada. Time was running out. With the clock ticking, Beth and Claire devised a plan. They needed to act quickly, but every move carried risks. Would Peter harm them if he found out? Could they trust the authorities to intervene before it was too late? As they prepared to confront Peter, the air thickened with tension. Every sound outside the camper felt like footsteps approaching, every shadow a threat looming closer. Then came the knock, the unmistakable thud of someone demanding entry. Through the window, Beth saw Peter standing there, swaying slightly, his face contorted with rage. In his hand, a gun glinted ominously under the dim light. What happened next defied imagination. Voices rose, accusations flew, and emotions boiled over in a confined space where escape seemed impossible. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance, growing brighter as sirens wailed through the night. Was help arriving in time? Or was this the moment everything fell apart? For Beth, Claire, and the twins, the stakes had never been higher. And just as hope flickered amidst the chaos, Peter made a choice that left everyone breathless. To find out what happens next, stay tuned, because sometimes the darkest truths lie closest to home, and unraveling them changes lives forever. The weight of the past few months pressed heavily on Beth as she sat in the waiting room, watching her daughters. Through the glass partition, Emma and Lily were curled up together on a hospital bed, their small hands intertwined, just as they had been since they were infants. Nurses moved around them, checking vitals and asking gentle questions, but the twins remained unusually quiet, their wide eyes reflecting confusion and lingering fear. Beth couldn't blame them. For 4 days, they had been locked away in a hidden room, cut off from sunlight, fresh air, and the world outside, all because Peter, her husband, their father, had let his desperation spiral into something monstrous. Beth's mind drifted back to the early days of their marriage, before the cracks began to show. She remembered how proud Peter had been when he bought this house, how he'd carried her across the threshold with a grin that made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. Back then, the colonial-style home had symbolized everything they hoped for: stability, love, and a future filled with laughter. But dreams can crumble under pressure, and Peter's unraveling started slowly, almost imperceptibly. It began with the job loss, a blow to his ego that he never fully recovered from, and grew worse with each passing month. The polished floors became dull, the garden overgrown, and the laughter that once echoed through the halls turned into silence, punctuated by arguments. Claire sat beside Beth now, her frail frame hunched forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Beth could see the guilt etched into every line on Claire's face. This wasn't the first time Claire had watched a man she loved destroy himself, and those around him. Beth remembered snippets of conversations over the years, vague references Claire had made about Peter's father, a man who ruled his household with an iron fist. He didn't know any other way, Claire had said once, her voice trembling. And neither did I. At the time, Beth hadn't understood what Claire meant. Now, sitting here in the sterile glow of the hospital lights, it all came into focus. Claire had spent decades trapped in a cycle of abuse and loyalty, choosing to protect her son even when it hurt others. Until today, she had finally broken free. As the hours ticked by, Beth found herself replaying Peter's descent into paranoia and control. His drinking had started innocuously enough. A beer after work, a glass of wine with dinner, but soon escalated into full-blown dependency. He'd snap at the girls for spilling milk or leave dishes piled high in the sink for days. Beth had tried everything, pleading, threatening, even staging an intervention, but Peter refused to admit he needed help. Instead, he lashed out, accusing Beth of undermining him, of trying to take the girls away. In his darkest moments, he'd accuse her of being selfish, of abandoning the family. The irony was that Beth had stayed far longer than she should have, clinging to hope that things would improve. When she finally left, moving into the modest camper at Pinewood Lakeside Campground, it wasn't out of spite, it was survival, for her and for the girls. But Peter's reaction to her departure only confirmed what Beth had feared most. His grip on reality was slipping. His calls grew erratic, his texts accusatory. During visits, he hovered over Beth like a shadow, scrutinizing every interaction she had with Emma and Lily. And then, just 10 days ago, he stopped answering his phone altogether. Beth had convinced herself it was temporary, that Peter needed space to process the separation. She never imagined he'd use their daughters as pawns in his twisted game of revenge. Detective Morris appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Harmon," he said softly, motioning for her to step outside. Beth followed him into the hallway, her heart pounding. Had Peter confessed? Was there more to uncover about the hidden room? Or worse, had he been planning something else entirely? The evidence we're gathering paints a troubling picture. Morris began, his tone measured. Your husband, he didn't just hide the girls. He planned this meticulously. The supplies in that room, the food, the toys, the hygiene items. It suggests he intended to keep them there for weeks, maybe longer. Beth felt her stomach churn. Weeks. The thought of Emma and Lily trapped in that tiny windowless space for days was unbearable enough. But weeks? Months? What kind of man could do that to his own children? And there's something else, Morris continued, hesitating. We found documents in Peter's study, notes detailing custody laws, court procedures, even psychological evaluations he'd drafted for you. It seems he believed if he could prove you were unfit, he'd gain sole custody permanently. Beth shook her head, struggling to comprehend the depths of Peter's delusion. But why go to such extremes? Why not just fight me in court? Morris sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. From what we've gathered, Peter didn't think he stood a chance in a fair legal battle. Not with his drinking, his instability. So he created his own version of justice, one where he controlled the narrative and the outcome. Back inside the hospital room, the twins clung to Beth, their tiny bodies trembling despite her reassurances. "Mommy, is Daddy sick?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Beth swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet her daughter's gaze. "Daddy made some mistakes, sweetheart, but we're going to help him get better. That's why we have doctors and police. They're here to make sure everyone stays safe." Lily frowned, her lower lip quivering. "Does that mean Daddy doesn't love us anymore?" The question hit Beth like a punch to the gut. How do you explain betrayal to a child without crushing their innocence? No, baby, she said, pulling both girls closer. Facade. Daddy loves you very much. Sometimes people make bad choices because they're hurting inside, but that doesn't mean they stop loving you. As the night wore on, Beth wrestled with conflicting emotions. Relief that her daughters were safe, warred with anger at Peter's recklessness. Guilt over leaving battled with pride for surviving. And beneath it all simmered a deep-seated fear. What if the system failed them again? What if Peter managed to manipulate his way out of consequences, only to return and try something even more dangerous? By morning, news of the case had spread throughout the community. Reporters camped outside the hospital, shouting questions whenever someone entered or exited. Beth ignored them, focusing instead on preparing Emma and Lily for discharge. Detective Morris assured her that Peter would remain in custody, pending further investigation. But Beth couldn't shake the feeling that this nightmare wasn't over. Not yet. That afternoon, as Beth packed the twins' belongings into a small duffel bag, Claire approached her cautiously. "Beth," she said, her voice trembling, "I owe you an apology." For everything. Beth paused, turning to face her mother-in-law. "You saved my daughters, Claire. Whatever mistakes you made before, you fixed them. That's what matters." Claire's eyes welled with tears. "I failed Peter. I failed my grandchildren. But I won't fail again. If you'll let me, I want to be part of their lives, to show them what real love looks like." Beth nodded, reaching out to squeeze Claire's hand. "You're their grandmother. Of course you're part of their lives. We'll figure it out together." As they walked out of the hospital, Beth holding one twin's hand and Claire the other, she allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. Emma and Lily deserved a life free from fear, a childhood filled with joy and security, and Beth vowed to give them exactly that, even if it meant facing whatever challenges lay ahead. But as the car pulled away from the curb, Beth couldn't ignore the nagging thought at the back of her mind. Peter was still out there, somewhere. Locked up for now, yes, but capable of spinning new lies, crafting new schemes. The question lingered, unspoken but heavy. Would he ever truly let them go? As the hospital lights dimmed and the twins finally drifted off to sleep, Beth sat beside them, her hand resting gently on Emma's forehead. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional rustle of sheets as Lily shifted in her sleep. Beth's mind raced with everything that had happened. The hidden room, Peter's breakdown, Claire's confession. And yet, through it all, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Her daughters were safe. They were alive. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The next morning, Detective Morris arrived at the hospital with updates. Peter had been formally charged with child endangerment and unlawful imprisonment, among other counts. His initial court appearance revealed a man barely holding himself together, his once commanding presence reduced to tears and apologies. Beth listened silently as Morris explained that Peter would undergo psychological evaluation and likely enter a rehabilitation program tailored for parents involved in custody disputes. "He needs help," Morris said firmly, "and now he'll get it, whether he wants to or not." Claire sat across from Beth in the hospital waiting area, her frail hands clasped tightly around a cup of coffee. She looked smaller somehow, as though the weight of her choices had physically worn her down. Yet there was also a glimmer of something else, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. "I've spent my whole life protecting men who couldn't protect themselves," Claire admitted softly. "But I failed them too, in my own way, by staying silent, by making excuses. I let fear rule me. Beth reached over and placed a hand on hers. You broke the cycle, Claire. That's what matters. You saved your granddaughters. Later that day, Beth returned to the house with Detective Morris to gather some of the twins' belongings. Walking through the familiar rooms, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for the life they'd lost, anger at how far things had fallen, but also determination to rebuild. In the twins' bedroom, she packed their favorite stuffed animals, books, and blankets, careful to include every little thing that might bring them comfort. As she worked, Morris stood nearby, jotting notes about the evidence collected from the hidden room. It's rare to see something like this, he said thoughtfully. A parent so consumed by fear and desperation that they lose sight of what really matters. Beth paused, looking at him. Do you think he ever realized how much he loved them? Or was it always overshadowed by his need to control? Morris hesitated, then shook his head. Some people don't know how to love without possession, but your girls, they're lucky to have you. You've shown them what real love looks like. Back at the hospital, Beth found Emma and Lily awake and eager to leave. Their energy was infectious, a reminder of how resilient children could be, even after unimaginable trauma. Can we go home now, Mommy? Lily asked, tugging at Beth's sleeve. Home. The word struck Beth deeply. For the past 10 days, she'd been living in a camper, trying to create a fresh start. But now, with her daughters safely by her side, she realized that home wasn't a place. It was the bond they shared. Wherever they were together, that was home. Detective Morris arranged for temporary housing, while Beth figured out her next steps. Social services provided resources to help her navigate the legal battle ahead, including securing full custody of the twins. Beth knew it wouldn't be easy. Peter's actions had left scars that would take time to heal, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Claire had promised to stay involved, vowing to be a better grandmother than she'd been a mother-in-law. Neighbors and friends rallied around them, offering support in ways both big and small. In the weeks that followed, Beth focused on rebuilding, not just their lives, but herself. She enrolled in therapy, determined to process the pain of the past year and emerge stronger. The twins adjusted remarkably well, their laughter filling the air once again. Though they occasionally asked about their father, Beth answered honestly, framing his actions in terms they could understand. Daddy made a mistake, she told them one evening as they snuggled together on the couch. But he loves you very much, and someday, when he's ready, maybe you can see him again. As the months passed, Beth began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt lighter, freer, as if shedding the weight of resentment had allowed her to breathe fully for the first time in years. Claire became a regular part of their lives, baking cookies with the twins and sharing stories about their family's history. Slowly but surely, they were creating new memories, ones rooted in love, trust, and hope. One sunny afternoon, as Beth watched Emma and Lily chase each other through the backyard of their new rental home, she felt a profound sense of peace. The grass was green, the sky was blue, and her daughter's giggles filled the air. It wasn't the future she'd envisioned, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. Beth realized then that the story of their family wasn't defined by the darkness they'd endured, but by the light they'd chosen to carry forward. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the yard, Beth smiled. Life wasn't about avoiding storms. It was about learning to dance in the rain. Together, she and her daughters had weathered the worst, and now they stood stronger because of it. Whatever came next, they would face it as a team, bound by a love that refused to be locked away.